North Idaho College proudly presents NIC Today, an informational news magazine that highlights the people, programs, and campus life at North Idaho College and the surrounding community. And now, your host and moderator, President of North Idaho College, Dr. Rick McLennan.
Hi, and welcome to NIC Today. I am not President Rick McLennan. Instead, I am Stacy Hudson here today as your host and moderator of the show. Today's topic is stories, and I have three amazing North Idaho College students here with me to talk a little bit about this topic from two different angles. First, their own personal story, and also their role on the award-winning student newspaper, The Sentinel, here at North Idaho College, and how they participate in the telling of stories. And so thank you all for joining me today. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I think that I'm going to start up first with Gerry. Gerry covers sports and does sports photography for the Sentinel. Is that correct, Gerry?
Yeah.
Good. So tell me just a little bit about why this interests you. I understand from the story you've shared with me before that you're interested in sports, but never really participated too much. So this is your way of kind of getting really close to it and helping others tell their story. Is that right?
Yeah, I've always found sports to be interesting. I never really got the chance to play too many sports. I was moving around a lot as a kid, so grew up watching and finding interviews with athletes interesting. So it was just something that I fell in love with personally and wanted to take part in it.
It's fantastic. I would love to hear what of maybe your greatest stories that you've had the chance to tell. Do you have one memorable experience that really stands out to you covering sports and taking photographs for the Sentinel?
For the Sentinel, the women's home playoff game in soccer, it was really fun. They won on a walk-off goal, so that was very exciting to watch all their smiling faces.
That's
and
great.
Them celebrate. So
It's fantastic. And plans for the future? I mean, so what does your personal story hold from here on out? What would you like to do?
I'd hope that I can get a job working in sports journalism somewhere, whether that's locally or somewhere else. If it works, it works.
Fantastic. Well, I hope for the best for you. Quincey, that kind of brings me to your story because your story is sort of similar in a way, with one little caveat, which is that you shared with me that you didn't always want to write, which I think is really interesting. In fact, you didn't really like writing at all. And so your natural inquisition, I think, for politics and for learning the stories behind what makes people tick kind of steered you toward this field of journalism. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you became interested in the field.
Well, in high school I didn't do so well. I wasn't getting the best grades. I later went to an alternative high school where people were able to work with me and I was able to find out some of my talents. I was always really interested in film and politics, and I was thinking I was going to go into law. But in the back of my mind, I was always thinking it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, and I was always really fascinated with history from the last 60 years, and especially Watergate. And I think that the combination of politics and how journalism really informs the public, I think that really struck a chord with me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I like how you've kind of coupled a few different areas of politics and law as well as journalism. And is that your plan moving forward, to kind of combine some of those fields into more of a comprehensive view on the subject?
Yes, I'm thinking of informing myself more with law, maybe getting a minor in law, so I know in investigative reporting, you need to know how to get information, and there's legal ways to get documents and just the ins and outs of that. And I'm wanting to go to school on the East Coast.
That's fantastic.
Where it's all happening.
Definitely. You actually just came back from New York, and if I understand right, you were born in New York. You didn't live there for very long, but tell me about your trip to New York.
It was really something for me. It was the first time I've ever been on the East Coast since I lived there when I was 2 years old, but I think just walking around in the city, when I visit new places, I kind of try to immerse myself and pretend that I live there. So I was really worried that I wasn't going to like it, because whenever I don't like a place, I'm thinking like, oh, I would not want to live here, but I loved it, and I loved all the worst parts of it, so I think I would I would be fine.
That's great. I love that. You all went to New York, which is a really cool thing. There was a convention there for journalism students called the College Media Association, and you all got to experience kind of the city, which is really cool, especially for you, Quincey, but also just being among other journalism students. What was the best part for you, Kelli?
Oh, the best part for me actually was the location. Ironically, I feel like I have to be honest in that area. The location for the convention was incredible. We were right in the middle of Times Square. So I think that really gave us all the opportunity to be exposed to all forms of journalism. I mean, we were, blocks away from the media giants, Fox News and CBS and, all of these different places. And so we were around the corner from the New York Times. Wow. And so it was just really incredible and awe-inspiring just to be in that location and just to be as close as we were. The other part that I think was extremely fascinating is I was about 19 when 9/11 happened. And so when I go to New York, there is a really large part of me that considers that experience and seeing that and experiencing the aftermath and the politics and everything that followed afterward. And so there was actually several speakers or advisors that had discussions about how they covered 9/11 and stuff like that. So that was really interesting because that is one of the highest covered or I'm not really sure how to say it, but it was the most deeply covered event in history because of our technology at the time and because of what happened and where it was and location. And so it was really exciting to be there and to just kind of feel that closeness with that event and the coverage of it. So really inspiring.
What about for you, Gerry? I didn't get a chance to ask you, but you also accompanied these ladies to New York in a larger group of Sentinel students. What was the best part for you?
I had a really good time at, there was one sports conference that I particularly enjoyed, and it was actually the speaker didn't show up.
Notice how it has nothing to do with the actual speaker.
It was a bunch of guys that are interested in sports writing. We were all in this small room, and once we realized the speaker wasn't going to show up, we all just ended up, talking about what we do at our individual schools. So it was interesting to hear from people from larger schools and even in some instances smaller schools, and the difficulties that come with that, and us giving each other advice, and it was really helpful.
That is helpful. So the speaker didn't show. Any other hint, missed opportunities that you missed out on in New York that Kelli maybe got to take advantage of? They shared a story with me right before we went on set, and they probably shouldn't have, but it's a great story. Would one of you share it? Kelli
I got to meet Mike Strahan, and he did not.
Basically the sports reporter, right? That's fantastic. It sounds like you guys all had a great time. You came in laughing and joking, and I'm grateful to have this time with you this morning to just kind of recap how it all went, and glad that it went well for all of you. What I haven't had a chance to do yet is talk to you, Kelli, just a little bit about your personal story. And again, we're making this connection between stories and how we tell stories as journalists and how we have our own story that kind of adds to to what it is that we do and who it is that we are. Some of your history you shared, yours as well, Gerry, and I'd just love to hear a little bit about you and your family, because you have a really unique circumstance that's brought your family situation to who you are and what you are today.
Okay. So our story is basically my husband and I had decided to adopt a child from the Democratic Republic of Congo. We narrowed it down. We were essentially prepared to pay a certain amount of money, and we were expecting certain things. There were certain requirements along the way that we were aware of and that we were very prepared for. A lot of those requirements included training on how to prepare ourselves for the trauma that our children have faced. Which is all to be expected. We never know exactly how these children are going to have been traumatized and the needs that they are going to face, but that's the kind of training that we receive to try and at least have a foundation to where we can build upon. Sadly, when I brought the children home, they were not traumatized in the ways that we were prepared for. But there was a whole different trauma that had happened that we had never even heard of, and that was the trauma that we were experiencing as parents after the battles that we had faced. They were held against their will for 2 years, longer than what they were supposed to have been. And that whole 2 years cost us several, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars just to care for them and to visit them and to pay other fees related to their care and adoption expenses. But all of that seemed really easy until the moment they walked through those doors at the airport, where my emotions and somehow my mentality and my mental health completely just escaped me. It just left. And I remember very clearly within the first week or so of them being home, being very confused as to how I was feeling. Basically, such emotions of regret, remorse, almost, I would say, very close to hatred towards the kids. A lot of envy and anger and frustration towards them. And I didn't understand where it was coming from, because these were children that I had loved not very long ago, but at a long distance. And so we kind of looked into some help, and I remember very clearly messaging some other parents who had brought their children home and telling them, this is how I'm feeling, and none of them really understood. They were so busy trying to adjust and adapt to the normal things that we were prepared for that none of them had any idea. So it was very concerning to me. It was very... I had no idea who to turn to. I had no idea what questions to ask or where to go, because nobody had any idea that this was a training that we had not received. There was no warning for any form of postpartum depression related to adoption and post-traumatic stress disorder that was related to the aftermath of an emotional battle trying to bring your children home. So we were very confused, and they've been home almost 3 years. We celebrate their 3-year mark next week, and it's been almost 3 years, and we are still just floating. We're not thriving. We're just surviving right now. And that's okay, because we're learning and we're growing. And as long as I can get that out there, that, these kind of diagnoses can come in many different ways, and parents can suffer as well during adoption and have trauma, just like the children have. And they're just as important as the children.
There's so much stigma attached to anything kind of related to mental health issues, especially a situation like you're describing where it doesn't quite line up with what we've always known to be true. So I'm just grateful for your willingness to share your story. And obviously you've found some of the support that you've needed. Hopefully you've been able to offer others support. What would you say to others who are experiencing something similar to what you've gone through?
Get help. Get any help that you can, up to and including seeing a doctor and being medicated if you need to be, because we're lucky that we live in a time where we have help. We have the science and we have the doctors that can help us, and you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer at all, and it's totally normal to me. It was normal for me. It wasn't normal for other people, but it is something that can happen, and so that's what I would let them know.
Yeah,
there is a possibility.
Again, our topic today was stories, and I'm just so grateful for all of you to share your stories with me and for the stories that you get to share out there in the community. I too was a Sentinel student in my time here at North Idaho College and spent the next 20 years in the field of communications getting to tell stories just like yours. So in my own way, I'm also grateful to participate in something like this today and learn more about you and share that with the lives of others here at NIC. So again, thank you for joining me. We will see you next time.